Let's talk about all this, shall we? Here on the panel tonight in Washington, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt. Also in D.C., senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico, Michael Crowley. Editor for Bloomberg Business Week, Megan Murphy, is here with us in New York. Also joining us, our political analyst and host of the Hugh Hewitt Show, the appropriately named Hugh Hewitt. His newest book, by the way, entitled The Fourth Way, the Conservative Playbook for a Lasting GOP Majority. Welcome to you all. Michael, because your piece had the headline today, Trump picks up the phone and sets off diplomatic chaos. You get to go first. What's going on?
Well, Brian, that's the question that world leaders are asking themselves right now. And what's so interesting to me is that you have some key leaders planning their trips to Washington to meet with Donald Trump. Of course, these phone calls are going to continue. And what I'm hearing is that they're studying what's happening now very closely, trying to adjust to it, trying to figure out, how do you deal with this guy? How do you avoid stumbling into a diplomatic incident? How do you prepare yourself for the unexpected with Donald Trump? And, you know, to take one more example that didn't come up because there's so much to talk about, Theresa May, who came and had a very high-profile visit with Donald Trump last week, British Prime Minister, had a very chummy, cozy meeting with Trump. They walked out of the Oval Office briefly holding hands, I guess, when they were going down a step or something. She came home to a real firestorm after Trump signed those executive orders instituting severe travel restrictions, and is under a lot of fire now back home for having been chummy with Trump. So you can get burned by being friendly to Trump, and you can get burned by taking what you think is going to be a simple phone call that devolves into an argument, or you can have a confrontation like Peña Nieto in Mexico. This can go wrong in so many different ways, and world leaders are trying to figure out, how do you adapt to this? They don't know yet.
And Casey Hunt, your beat, Capitol Hill, is where this story gets so interesting. The Beatles gave us that lyric, I'm fixing a hole where the rain gets in. All they're doing up there is fixing holes. They've got nothing but constituent phone calls when they go back to the office. And during the day, some of them are calling the Aussies to patch up holes that have been blown by the new president while running out of spackle. What an interesting place to be.
I'm going to try to track here with your analogy, Brian. But yes, it's almost as though they are trying to patch these holes while they're trying to insist over here that the ceiling is not caving in on them. And I think, you know, it's becoming, it's not just more and more difficult every day, but it's more chaotic. The number of places and issues and major, I mean, in this case, a major relationship with a longtime ally. You know, a couple of days ago, it feels like weeks ago, but it was just a handful of days ago that executive order on immigration came down and kind of scrambled everything. And so you have, on the one hand, Republicans who are starting to feel, I mean, today they were feeling pressure to essentially play diplomat. I mean, this is something that they're usually very careful to largely stay out of if the president of the United States is, you know, taking action overseas. There has always been this tradition of stopping at the water's edge. That does not seem to be what happened today. And then on the flip side, you have Democrats who, as you note, have been overwhelmed. There's some question about whether these calls that are coming in are from real people or are they driven by, you know, programs, computer programs, robocalls, etc. But the switchboards are being overwhelmed, and it's being driven in large part by Democratic activists who are just so incensed over what happened with this executive order. The temperature has just ratcheted up so much. We've gone from, you know, Democrats who said, hey, we're not going to just oppose everything because it has Trump's name on it, to them being in a political position where they can hardly work with him at all. And, you know, I think I and many members that I talk to on Capitol Hill every day, you know, wake up not knowing what on earth the next hole is going to be.
Megan Murphy here in our studio. Let's be honest, isn't it time Australia got theirs? Think about it. Beautiful people, nice people, beautiful country, those huge cans of Foster's lager that anger us so much, gorgeous marsupials, Olivia Newton-John, the Bee Gees. Wasn't this appropriate to go after Australia?
The greatest beer, the greatest marsupials. You know,
yeah, really, the best
greatest Olivia Newton-John. Yeah. Look, I mean, I think that we're getting to a point where it's hard to see a landscape where there hasn't been a diplomat. incident so far. We look at Israel, we look at Iran, we look at the UK, we look at the rhetoric that's coming out, and we look particularly at Australia. Now, this is an ally that has been one of our staunchest defenders, has participated, when you look at World War I, World War II, every single conflict, the amount of that they've risked, that they've invested, that their people feel so tied to the democratic cause, with such a robust parliamentary system, who would count to us as among their strongest allies throughout the world. And to have a conversation, as is so described, that lasts 25 minutes and descends almost into an aggressive screaming match about this so-called issue of the Obama deal with these not illegal immigrants, actually refugees coming to this country. It sometimes staggers and as discussed, almost seems like he was talking to a different country or was confused about who he was actually talking to.
Hugh Hewitt, you have so often called out Donald Trump when he strays from your brand of Republicanism into whatever this new Trumpism is. But that in mind, Australia, really?
Well, if you read Bill Bryson's Notes from a Sunburned Country, there's a lot to worry about in Australia. In many ways, you can get killed unexpectedly. But I'm looking for the signal among the noise here, Brian. And today it was announced that President Obama, after deftly executing a sidebar with King Abdullah that 3 days ago people were afraid couldn't happen because he wanted to meet formally with Benjamin Netanyahu first, after doing so, issued a standard American policy that we would prefer that no new settlements be issued, and that we would also prefer that things calm down and we have a two-state solution. So he reiterated traditional American policy, and no one's given him a thumbs up, or the Abdullah meeting a thumbs up on that. I'd also say that I talked to Republicans at the prayer breakfast today. They love the idea of getting rid of the Johnson Amendment. It's long been a great sticking point, and they're still ecstatic over Judge Gorsuch's nomination. So the doom and gloom over a tense phone call with Australia, I think, is a little overplayed in a media that is not prone to find anything good to say about Donald Trump.
I think Megyn may disagree with you.
Yeah, I think that's putting a sort of light gloss on what's happened. We're not just talking about one tense call with Australia. We're talking about, again, today we're looking at Israel. You called it a bombshell. It certainly is for him to come out and say, I support a two-state solution, and I'm reticent about settlements if that's going to be policy. And again, that's not because that is or is not the policy. It's just because they are coming so fast and furious, and no one knows exactly what to gauge or where to stand. When you see him with Mexico sort of saying, look, we're not going to talk about the wall. I'm going to put in a border tax. World leaders are really standing back and looking and saying, how do I deal with this kind of attitude? How do I deal with this type of policy making? Theresa May is an excellent case in point. She came to the U.S. in a very high charge for her as well visit. She came back, just negative press throughout the board by her attitude of trying to strike conciliatory tone to him. There are many people who are facing in their home countries of thinking, look at the policies put in place, banning refugees, potentially a tone of putting in examples that would roll back rights across a broad swath of people. This is anathema to many people in Europe. Angela Merkel has spoken out in Germany. French, Donald Tusk from the EU. His policies are unsettling, and it's not so much, as I said, the policies themselves. It's the process by which he's going through putting them in, the speed at which they're going through putting them in, and the unpredictable nature about what they're saying on a foreign policy level, which is really unsettling to people who are trying to discover what